Andrew, let me begin with you. And one of the mistakes I think has quickly floated out there about this, and the fact the New York Times fell for it in their reporting, and that is the notion that Weisselberg has reached an agreement with prosecutors that he'll tell the truth about the Trump Organization, and that's it, nothing more. He will not testify one word against Donald Trump, as if that is within Weisselberg's power to not honestly answer questions about Donald Trump. Clarify this for us, please.
Yeah, I think that the Times got that a little bit wrong. I think what is true is that Alan Weisselberg is not required to give the government information about facts unrelated to the current indictment against him and against the Trump Organization. But he is required to testify truthfully if called as a witness at the Trump Organization trial scheduled for October 24th. And that date is highly unlikely to move. At that trial, the judge, as you noted, repeatedly said, you have to testify truthfully. So it is going to be difficult, not impossible, but difficult for Alan Weisselberg to come up with a story that doesn't mention the T word. This is a small organization, and we're talking about a 15-year scheme. He would have to say under oath that this payroll scheme happened, but Donald Trump never knew anything about it, that all of the people involved deliberately kept it from him. Why would you even do that, since he's the beneficiary of it? I mean, this is something he might actually like and be proud of, the fact that you're figured out a scheme to save him money. But it seems to me that's the conundrum if he's going to go down the route of trying to not implicate Donald Trump. And the final point I'd like to make is the lawyers here for Alan Weisselberg, they are real lawyers. These are people who are representing Alan Weisselberg and just him. So I am confident that before he testifies, they're going to be stressing to him the need to just tell the truth and sort of the ramifications if he doesn't.
Tim O'Brien, I think I first heard the words Alan Weisselberg from you, because you know more about the Trump business than other reporters out there. You know more than most. And so you've been reporting on it for years. You know these players. You know Donald Trump. You know the Weisselberg relationship to the whole entity. What are the chances that Alan Weisselberg never once had a conversation with Donald Trump about any one of these 15 felonies?
I think zero, Lawrence, absolutely zero. There were no financial decisions of substance made at the Trump Organization, whether it pertained to deals or compensation or anything else that involved money going out the door, that Donald Trump did not sign off on, in word, if not on paper. And there were only two people at that organization outside of the children who Donald Trump would say, make sure both of them have signed off on this before I do it. One was Alan Weisselberg. The other was Jason Greenblatt. And it's still strange to me that Jason Greenblatt's name hasn't surfaced in all of this. He was a general counsel at the Trump Organization. Donald would always turn to Alan and Jason to get a stamp of approval on anything. I think Jeff McConney and Matthew Calamari's names will also come up in the future. Having said all of this, I think that, as Andrew pointed out, the idea that Alan Weisselberg is not cooperating is true only in the narrowest sense. He now has to go to trial with this sort of sword hanging over his head that if he is found to be lying, he could get as much as 15 years in prison. So he is over the coals now, and there might as well be a cooperation agreement in place, because he is now going to, I think, be a material witness against the Trump Organization. The other thing to remember is that the Trump Organization has been in financial trouble over the last 2 years. It has an enormous amount of debt hanging over the company. It's been battered by the COVID lockdowns. It's in the worst businesses you could have imagined being in during COVID: urban real estate, and essentially tourism and entertainment. And Trump has had every reason to try to dodge corners financially. I think there's a real possibility that the Manhattan DA's investigation, combined with the New York State Attorney General's civil investigation, could put the Trump Organization out of business.
So, Tim, the new risk that Weisselberg faces, if he wants to somehow protect Donald Trump, would be the risk of perjury. Is Weisselberg at age 75 prepared to risk perjury, which would then cost him a few years in prison at minimum?
Well, predicating this with, I cannot get into his head, so I don't know for sure. But anyone who spent any time around Donald Trump knows that loyalty is a one-way street in his universe. He demands extreme loyalty from everyone around him, but it never goes in the other direction. And I can't imagine that Alan Weisselberg at this stage in his life is going to want to wind up in an orange jumpsuit to show that he is loyal to Donald Trump. I just don't see that happening.